Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're tackling something really fundamental. It's this idea of ethical knowing. So it's not just about what we know, but more about, well, what should we do because of what we know?
Right, and that feels incredibly relevant today, doesn't it? With information, new technologies just exploding all around us.
It really does. Simply having knowledge isn't, the end of the story.
Not at all. There are responsibilities that come with it. And for this discussion, we're leaning on a piece called K and Knower Ethics, and that's some really, really important questions.
Exactly. And our aim today, our sort of mission, is to get practical. We want to look at some real-world cases that really shine a light on these ethical puzzles.
Sounds good. Where do we start?
Okay, so first up, the source talks about this basic idea.
Yeah.
Powerful knowledge brings powerful obligations. You know something significant, you have a duty that comes with it.
Right.
And the example they use right off the bat is, well, it's pretty jarring. It's the Heichi gene editing situation back in 2018. Those twin embryos.
Ah, yes. That case is striking because it shows how our technical ability actually changing the human genome just ran way ahead of any sort of ethical agreement or framework.
Yeah, it wasn't like there was a clear medical need.
No, exactly. It was done outside of all the accepted protocols, the scientific norms, the ethical guidelines that existed.
And the reaction was huge, wasn't it, globally?
Oh, absolutely. There was widespread outrage, and understandably so.
And it led to real consequences. China tightened its regulations quite significantly for research on human subjects.
And Jiangku himself was banned from clinical work in the future.
So it really hammers home this point. Just because we can do something scientifically, that doesn't automatically mean we should. There's a duty of care, right?
Absolutely. A fundamental duty of care, especially when the knowledge is that powerful, that potentially transformative.
So the takeaway isn't just, oh, he broke the rules. It's that the very power to do something like that demands we think ahead, ethically. We need consensus before, not just react after.
Precisely. Scientific feasibility and ethical permissibility. They're just not the same thing. This case really underscores that people who develop and hold this kind of knowledge have this deep responsibility to think through the implications, the potential harms.
Okay, so building on that, if powerful knowledge brings responsibility, we also have to think about how our own biases might, distort how we use that knowledge.
Right, which can lead to real harm.
Yeah, and the source gets into this moral duty to really examine our own biases, which feels super relevant now with AI and algorithms shaping so much.
It really is. And the key thing here is that bias isn't just like a personal failing. It can actually get baked right into the systems we create.
How so?
Well, think about AI. It learns from data. If that data reflects biases already out there in society, say, facial recognition trained on data that underrepresents certain groups, the AI learns, and unfortunately often amplifies those biases.
And the examples are pretty eye-opening. Like in 2020, when IBM, Amazon, Microsoft all paused sales of facial recognition tech to U.S. police.
Exactly. That happened because the systems were shown to misidentify Black citizens much more often, sometimes leading to wrongful arrests. It's a stark example of bias having real-world consequences.
That pause felt significant.
It was. It was like the tech creators themselves saying, hold on, we need to look at our code, look at our assumptions, our cognitive frames, as the source calls them.
Cognitive frames.
Yeah.
So like the underlying viewpoints, maybe even unconscious ones that shape the tech.
Pretty much, yeah. Before we unleash these powerful tools, we need to audit ourselves, not just the code.
And then there's the story of Timnit Gebru, her departure from Google.
After she co-authored that paper on bias in large language models.
That really brings home the personal costs sometimes of raising these ethical flags, doesn't it?
It really does. It highlights the ethical necessity of speaking out, but also the potential risks involved.
So the takeaway seems clear. Actively checking our biases in our heads and in our tech isn't just nice to have. It's like a core responsibility before our knowledge affects other people.
Okay, so bias can corrupt how we apply knowledge, but what about the knowledge itself? Should we always share everything we discover?
That's a tricky one.
Yeah, the source moves into this tension. When do we have a duty to share knowledge? And maybe counterintuitively, when might we have a duty to withhold it?
Feels like walking a tightrope sometimes.
It absolutely can be. The source gives great examples showing both sides. On one hand, think about early 2020 and the SARS-CoV-2 genome.
Right, that was shared incredibly quickly.
Exactly. And that rapid sharing was vital. It let researchers like those at Moderna develop vaccines super fast. That openness clearly served the greater good, saved lives.
A huge win for open science, definitely.
But then contrast that with the debate back in 2011. Remember the research on making the H5N1 bird flu virus airborne?
Oh, yeah. That sparked a huge controversy, didn't it? About whether to publish the methods.
It really did. You had security experts very worried, saying, look, this information could be misused, maybe by terrorists. Really serious concerns.
But the scientists argued for openness.
They did. They argued that sharing the knowledge was crucial for public health preparedness, for other scientists to develop countermeasures.
So what happened?
They reached a kind of compromise. They published the main findings, the conclusions, but held back some of the specific methodological details that would make it easy to replicate.
Interesting. A balancing act.
Exactly. It shows that the general duty to share knowledge isn't absolute. It can be overridden by another, potentially weightier duty, the duty to prevent catastrophic harm. It's about weighing those risks and benefits.
Okay, that makes sense. Now, the next point the source brings up feels really central to all of this. It's about how ethical judgments are fundamentally different from factual claims.
Yes, this is such an important distinction. Factual claims are about, is this true? Is it accurate?
Like verifying something.
Right. But ethical claims are about values, about actions. They ask, what should we do about it? What's the right course of action?
And the example they use to illustrate this is deepfakes, AI-generated fake videos or audio.
Perfect example. We can develop tools, image forensics, to figure out if a video is real or fake. That's the factual part.
Determining the truth of it.
Exactly. But then you have a whole separate set of questions. Okay, it's fake. But is distributing it defamation? Is it harassment? Or maybe in some weird context, is it protected speech? Those aren't factual questions anymore.
Those are ethical judgments.
Precisely. And remember that case in 2024? The U.S. principal who almost lost his career over a racist audio deepfake.
Yeah, I wreck that.
The whole situation forced this difficult balancing act, establishing the fact that the audio was fake versus dealing with the community outrage, the principal's due process rights. These are all ethical and legal considerations, distinct from just knowing the audio wasn't real.
So knowing the truth is step one. Deciding what's right or wrong in response, that's a whole different ballgame.
Spot on.
Which kind of leads to this next, maybe even more challenging question. Is there some knowledge we shouldn't try to acquire at all?
It sounds almost anti-science, doesn't it? But the source suggests, yeah, maybe there are lines we shouldn't cross in the first place.
Like what kind of lines?
Well, think about the debate among chemists about publishing streamlined, easier ways to synthesize fentanyl precursors.
Because of the potential for misuse in illicit opioid labs.
Exactly. The risk that making it easier to produce these chemicals could directly fuel the opioid crisis was immense.
And regulators did step in there, didn't they?
They did. U.S. regulators put key intermediate chemicals under Schedule II controls, making them much harder to access.
Which sends a message.
It sends a strong message. It basically says, in this case, the foreseeable harm is just too great. It outweighs the potential scientific benefit of sharing that specific how-to knowledge openly. So yes, the idea is that there can be ethical red lines where disseminating certain knowledge is just too dangerous.
Okay. Now, a really common issue in ethics is disagreement. People look at the same situation and come to very different conclusions about what's right. So the source asks, does the fact that people disagree mean all views are equally okay?
Yeah, that's the relativism trap, isn't it? If we can't agree, does that mean anything goes?
Right. Is it just a matter of opinion?
The source argues, no, not really. Just because there's disagreement doesn't mean all claims are equally valid or acceptable.
And they use the facial recognition example again here, I think.
They do. You've got police advocates saying, look at the crime-fighting benefits, and civil rights groups saying, hold on, look at the racial bias and the potential for abuse, public safety versus justice. In a way.
A clear conflict.
Definitely. But look what happened. Those corporate moratoria in 2020, the pauses in sales, that showed that society can actually make judgments and set boundaries, even amidst disagreement.
So we don't just throw up our hands and say everyone's right.
Exactly. We see things like demands for higher accuracy benchmarks, calls for independent oversight boards, implementing sunset clauses for the technology. These are ways policymakers and society try to adjudicate these conflicts and establish ethical guardrails. Disagreement is real, but it doesn't paralyze us or mean that all views hold equal ethical weight.
Okay, that's a hopeful note, actually. Finally, the source brings it back to the individual. Ethics isn't just abstract rules, it's enacted by people.
Yeah, this is crucial. It's about the personal traits, the character of the ethical knower.
And they highlight Frances Haugen, the Facebook whistleblower.
Right, as embodying some of these key traits. They point to her intellectual humility. She gathered a lot of data before jumping to conclusions.
And empathy, too.
Yes, sympathy. She expressed real concern about the real-world harms she saw documented in the internal research. And then, of course, courage.
Definitely courage. Risking her career to bring that information forward.
And it wasn't just symbolic, right? Her testimony in 2021 actually spurred concrete action, like bipartisan bills aimed at algorithmic transparency.
So it shows that individual actions driven by these virtues like integrity, bravery, humility, they can actually make a difference. They're essential for driving ethical progress.
Absolutely.
So wrapping this all up, it feels like the main thread is that knowledge just isn't neutral, ever. It comes with strings attached, ethical strings. It constantly shapes our obligations to each other, to society.
Exactly. And the qualities of someone who navigates this well, they're vigilant about their own biases. They have the courage to share truths when needed.
And maybe the wisdom to withhold sometimes.
Right. And the humility to know they might not have all the answers, to be willing to revise their judgments. It's an ongoing process.
It really gives you pause for thought, doesn't it? Maybe think for a moment about some piece of knowledge you have, something you know fairly well. What responsibilities might come along with that knowledge for you? How could you be a more ethical knower in your own sphere? That's something worth mulling over. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.